New footage coming in obtained by Reuters purported to be of some of those U.S. airstrikes carried out this evening. Reuters cannot independently verify the footage, but this appears to be the scene in Iraq this evening after the U.S. launched retaliatory strikes against Iranian targets in Iraq and Syria after 3 U.S. soldiers were killed in Jordan last weekend from a drone linked to Iran. Joining us now is Air Force Special Operations Commander Major Glenn Ignazio and the Vice President of Foreign Policy at the Heritage Foundation, Jim Carafano. Major, your analysis of what we have seen tonight at the beginning of what we are told will be a much longer operation that could take days.
Yes, the initial strikes have taken out command and control, and of course the idea of them being able to see, disseminate, and see intelligence, and also communicate with the additional forces. It took them out, definitely know where those sites were. Additionally, the logistics and supply chain that they have, which is where they're storing these rockets and drones, to be able to take those facilities out. Without those type of stores, they're not able to carry out the attacks regardless of where they are. So that's the ability to be able to strike that. 85 targets near simultaneously across the country is an incredible message to say what kind of power and execution we have. And it'll sustain from this point on to make sure that they don't have the ability to regroup and re-attack us. But it's definitely critical that we show and push back on the Iranian factions and splinter those factions as we have done today. Absolutely the right move, and we need to sustain that in the future.
Mr. Carafano, the U.S. and U.S. interests have been repeatedly attacked since the October 7th massacre in the Middle East, and a lot of folks are asking why it took the deaths of 3 U.S. soldiers in order for us to present a meaningful response to Iran.
Well, I think the simple answer is we don't have a deterrent structure with Iran, where Iran is afraid of doing things that are counter to American interests, including causing the deaths of Americans. And honestly, I don't think we've moved the ball here. I think we lost this before it started. When the administration came out and said, we're going to respond at a time and place of our choosing, well, that sounds really tough. But then they said, but we're not going to attack Iran. We don't want. So essentially, they said they weren't going to do an attack on Iran soil. What was the predictable response of Iranians? They come out and they demonstrably say, well, if America attacks us, we'll crush them. So, of course, they can be boastful because they knew they were going to be under attack. But part of the problem is if you cannot hold at risk the thing the enemy really values, they're not deterred. They can take hits to their surrogates. All that's replaceable. So I don't think we've achieved deterrence against Russia. And I have to be honest, I think the timing could not have been worse. To wait till Friday after the market close, for the drop dead bad news time on Friday to kind of lowball this whole thing, that sends a message. And then the other thing I'll just end on this is the U.S. has been running around the region trying to do stuff. And on the one hand, people say, oh, look, America's engaged, but it's all reactive. And the U.S. has been very kind of slow rolling things for 3 years. And the question is why is the U.S. so heavily engaged now? And people just look at the calendar and say, oh, because the elections are coming. So the American response definitely looks like it's more designed to deal with domestic politics than it really is to deal with the problems of the region.
Major, I want you to respond to that because a lot of folks have said that we really seem to lack a coherent strategy, foreign policy just generally at this point, and there's a lack of effective deterrence when it came to Russia and Ukraine, certainly the debacle in Afghanistan, and now it seems like a lack of coherent strategy again in the Middle East. Your thoughts on whether or not that has been a catalyst for why we have seen all of these attacks and why we are now in essentially a proxy war with Iran?
Yeah, great question. And I agree with Jim on his tenets of what he just established. You're absolutely right. If you take a look at it, doesn't matter if it's Taiwan, you take a look at Afghanistan, as you mentioned, the engagement in Ukraine, there's no clear strategy of what we're doing, both in entering or what our exit strategy would be. I mean, you can't just go bomb and say, hey, okay, we're good. That's just not the case. And to give you, for instance, this tactical operation that just happened, that's what I'm all for. But let's take a look at the whole story. There's over 160 attacks that have occurred. At some point, statistically, something's going to happen. And that's what happened the other night when we lost 3 of our soldiers. The idea that we should have been preemptive in stopping this That's a strategy. We're not going to let you tolerate or accept any actions whatsoever against U.S. forces, U.S. personnel, or assets in the area. That's what did not occur. There is no clear strategy. I hate to say it, I'm apolitical in my approach, but from a military perspective and a protection perspective, it's lacking and it does not exist and it needs to change.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Major Glenn Ignazio and Jim Carafano of the Heritage Foundation, thank you both.